The film starts on Mars, where the crew of the Eris 3 space mission is performing their daily duties. However, there's a storm approaching, and according to the computer simulation, the storm is strong enough to tip over their orbital ship. So, the mission commander Melissa orders the crew to evacuate the planet ASAP, even though a crew member named Mark doesn't want to abort the mission just yet. Their pilot Martinez gets the ship ready, while the whole crew follows Melissa through the violent storm. Mark is at the end of the line, and he gets hit by one of the satellite dishes and gets pulled away. Martinez finds out that Mark's suit got punctured and he is most likely going to die due to oxygen loss. Melissa sends her entire crew towards the ship while she tries to look for Mark, but her efforts are futile. This is when another crew member advises Melissa to get to the ship so that they can escape before it's too late. With a heavy heart, Melissa gets back to the ship and orders their departure. Back on Earth, the director of NASA, Teddy, announces Mark's death in a press conference. The whole world is in shock. However, on Mars, Mark is still alive. He's injured and lying in the desert. His oxygen level is decreasing, so he gets up and goes back to the living quarters and removes the object protruding from his stomach. He tends to his wounds and then goes on to record a video message where he explains how he survived. He has no way to contact the authorities on Earth, and he doesn't have enough resources, especially the food, to survive till the next NASA mission arrives on Mars. After spending a frightful night alone, Mark gets up the next day and makes an inventory of his food rations. The next Mars mission will arrive in 5 years, and Mark only has food for the next 400 days. He's wondering how to get more food when he remembers the seed potatoes that NASA sent on this mission. He also knows about the dried feces available to him in abundance. The best thing is that Mark is a botanist and he knows how to grow food, so he cleans up an area inside the headquarters before laying down the Martian dirt on the floor. He then uses seed potatoes and feces to sow dozens of potato plants. However, he's still missing one piece of the puzzle. He needs a lot of water. He has the raw material to make water chemically, and he uses a wooden cross to get the fuel to start a small fire. After getting everything ready, he lights up the wood shavings, and the water production begins, but it all ends with an explosion. Mark finds out that he was exhaling too much oxygen, which caused the explosion. So, he gets into the spacesuit and starts the reaction again, and this time, everything goes smoothly. He's producing enough water that by the 54th day, a small plant is growing in his own headquarters. Back on Earth, NASA has a funeral for Mark. The man in charge of the Eris missions, Dr. Vincent, wants to get approval for 2 more Mars missions, but Teddy won't allow him to use the satellites to check the headquarters and resources. So, Vincent asks an intern to keep an eye on the Eris 3 mission site. This is when she discovers that certain things changed on the surface after the mission's failure. She calls Vincent, and pretty soon Teddy and the others are realizing that Mark is still alive because he moved things around the headquarters. They know that people will soon find out about this, so the next day, Teddy gives the news of Mark's survival in a press conference. The whole world is following this story, but Mark doesn't know about it, and he's focused on reaching the landing spot for the next Mars mission. He has to somehow travel 3,200 kilometers, and he's exploring different ideas to make this journey possible. Meanwhile, on Earth, Teddy and his team are trying to send a supply mission to Mars to keep Mark alive. They're worried about Mark's condition, but he's doing just fine because his crops have yielded great results. He's now focused on finding a way to make contact, and that's why he's moving in a certain direction. On Earth, Vincent notices Mark's movements and figures out that Mark is trying to find an abandoned robot that turned off in 1997. So, Vincent goes to NASA's workshop to find the responder for the robot. They're hoping that Mark will make the robot work, and by some miracle, Mark actually gets the robot named Pathfinder working. He connects it to the power and even puts up some signs asking if anyone can receive him. When Vincent sees this, he points to the yes sign, and as soon as the robot signals towards the yes, Mark is jubilant. He knows that NASA is listening to him, and he decides to use hexadecimal to have a meaningful conversation with people on Earth. Some engineers find out what Mark is doing, and they also use hexadecimal, and pretty soon, they're able to ask long questions. The engineers guide Mark to connect the rover to Pathfinder, and now Mark can simply type and chat with them. His first real communication with people on Earth is broadcasted all over the globe, and the whole world watches as Mark uses some curse words. He wants his crew to know about his survival, so the flight director, Mitch, sends Melissa and the others a video on the spaceship Hermes, telling them how Mark is alive. They're happy, but also feel bad for leaving their friend. Meanwhile, Mark is sending pictures back home. Teddy, on the other hand, is still worried about sending supplies to Mars, and he is hoping that nothing goes wrong. However, things do go south when Mark accidentally blows up the pressure chamber. The Mars atmosphere instantly kills all his crops, and Mark has to fight for his life as he hides inside the rover. This new development has drastically reduced his chances of survival, and Teddy is accelerating the development of a supply mission, even though it's dangerous. So, while Mark fixes the headquarters by covering the giant hole with a tarp, NASA is working to try and rescue him. An engineer named Richard suddenly gets an idea that might actually save Mark, so he starts doing the calculations. At NASA, Teddy learns that the space probe isn't ready yet, and to make the deadline, he decides to launch the rocket without an inspection. This plan backfires when the rocket blows up only a few seconds after launch. This pretty much ends any hope of Mark's survival, and he asks Melissa to tell his parents that he loved them and he enjoyed every moment of this life. However, he still has a lifeline because the Chinese Space Agency has an extra rocket and they're willing to give it to NASA. So, Teddy's team again starts working to send supplies to Mars, but this is when Richard discovers something amazing. He instantly meets up with Vincent and explains his plan. During an emergency meeting, Richard tells everyone how they can get to Mark quicker than any other rescue mission if they send back Hermes that's getting ready to enter Earth's orbit. He assures them that he's done the math and his plan will work, but Teddy doesn't want to risk the lives of all his crew by sending them again to Mars. Mitch, on the other hand, doesn't agree with Teddy, and he sends Richard's plan to Hermes, where Melissa and the others learn that they can save their friend. They instantly decide to follow the plan, and it forces NASA to send them the supplies. So, for the next couple of weeks, Mark gets ready to get to an already present orbital space vehicle at the Eris 4 mission site that's 3,200 kilometers away. Meanwhile, the engineers get the probe ready, and they send it to Hermes by using the Chinese rocket, and Hermes is on its way to Mars. More than 450 days later, Mark finally leaves his headquarters to start his journey to the Eris 4 mission site. His journey will be nearly 50 days long, and he stops along the way to charge the batteries of the rover and also drives through some amazing landscape. While Mark is on his way, Vincent finds out that to get to the required altitude, they will need to remove a lot of weight from the orbital spaceship. Shockingly, they will even have to remove the outer protection. Engineers believe that due to the extremely light atmosphere of Mars, Mark can get to orbit by simply covering his ship with plastic sheets. When Mark hears about this plan, he is obviously not happy, but he has no choice. He starts removing all the excess material from the ship and even removes the outer panels, including the roof. He covers it with a parachute and then patiently waits as Hermes approaches Mars. The crew calculates that Mark has to be less than 200 meters away from Hermes, and only then they will be able to grab him. Any further than that, and they won't even reach him. Martinez will be responsible for operating Mark's ship, and as the day approaches, the whole world is holding its breath. Mark has his final meal on Mars, and he even leaves a note in the rover. After he gets strapped into the ship, Martinez launches it towards orbit, and Mark has to experience a lot of gravitational pull, which causes him to pass out. Back in Hermes, they calculate Mark's trajectory, and to their utter shock, Mark will be 68 kilometers away from them, and this is a big problem. To close the distance, Martinez uses the smaller thrust rockets on Hermes and pushes it towards Mars. The distance has decreased, but now there is another problem. They'll be passing by Mark at an alarming speed, so they have to find a way to slow down. While all of this is happening, Mark comes back to his senses and proposes to use oxygen in his suit to propel him towards Hermes. This gives Melissa an idea, and she decides to use some of the air inside Hermes to slow down its speed. She asks a crew member to make a bomb, and they quickly attach the bomb to an outer panel before getting into position to grab Mark. When they activate the bomb, the panel explodes and the air escapes the ship, causing it to slow down. They are now at the optimal velocity, but Mark is still 300 meters away from them, and now they're all out of options. Melissa goes as far as she can on her tethered chair. With no other option in sight, Mark punctures his suit and uses the air to propel him towards Hermes. He's coming in really fast, and Melissa has to react quickly, but she fails to grab his hand. Fortunately, Mark gets tangled in the tether. Melissa uses this opportunity to pull him towards herself and finally grabs him. Due to the long response time, people on Earth don't know what's happening. But when they find out that Mark has been rescued, the whole world celebrates this extraordinary feat of human engineering. The crew brings Mark back on Hermes, and they're over the moon to have their friend back. A few years later, Mark has now become an instructor at NASA. He still loves plants, and he always teaches future astronauts to be prepared for any kind of situation that they might face in space. The film ends with him answering the questions of his students.